Oh no, I'm Latino. Oh, we're all the same. Oh, we're all Colombian, white, black. It doesn't matter. It does. It has always mattered. And if it didn't matter, then it wouldn't be such virulent racism going on in your country. And if you don't want to acknowledge it, then you're not ready to be liberated from the United States. There's something to be said about the beauty and the pain and tragedy of being Latin American. Right now, here's a survey of some things happening in the greater Latin American landscape. Okay, not this, although technically yes. So right now, the US has hardened its blockade on Cuba to such a degree that fuel supplies are having to be rationed extremely tightly. And there is great risk for a type of impoverishment, potential famine, and other healthcare dangers, several dangers in Cuba. After Donald Trump declared Cuba's government to be an unusual and extraordinary threat to US national security, and punishing tariffs on any country that provides oil to Cuba, which is also squeezing and pressuring other Latin American countries not to work in solidarity with Cuba. And then you've got, how much this blockade and how it's been going on for a long time has contributed a massive worsening of conditions in Cuba. In South America, far, far away from Cuba at the bottom, okay? Argentina, under Javier Milei, far-right libertarian Elon Musk buddy, with several $1 billion of bailouts from the US government. It's falling inflation and yet massive gaps in inequality from massive austerity measures. Average incomes have fallen sharply, dragging down purchasing power, while household debt has risen and the poverty rate climbed above 50% before recently easing to 31.6%. And of course, Latin Americans in the United States are facing a nearly unprecedented in terms of immigration policy type of aggression towards immigrants, towards anybody who could be considered to be an immigrant, towards supporters of immigrants, whether it be the murders of Renee Good and Alex Pretti for protesting against ICE and surveilling them, to this kidnapping that continues to happen of small children, like 2-year-old Chloe. Chloe, as well as Elvis, her father, were driving back home from the grocery store when immigration officials decided to detain them. Now folks are reaching out with permission from her mother to the community to raise funds for lawyer fees, food, bond requests, rent, livability, and resources to keep this family together. It's an extremely racialized immigration crackdown, so has it been described, that has obviously been very focused on committing acts of violence against brown people and black people, including Somalis in Minnesota, Mexicans at the border, etc. And yet with all that tragedy, on Sunday night, Latin Americans inside and outside of the United States, around the world, gathered around different TV and computer screens and watched as a Puerto Rican man did a performance. Despite these ongoing crises, these anxieties about how life is going, these tragedies that keep occurring, folks celebrated as the message that Bad Bunny was putting on screen delivered a sense of hope, a sense of community, and a sense of connection in a way that art can do. Now, I want to make, clear that art has a specific role. It connects us with our humanity, okay? Art is not going to be able to fix the power grid in Puerto Rico. It's not going to get Luma out. Art is not going to conduct mutual aid networks in Atlanta or in Jackson, Mississippi. Art is not going to stop genocide in Palestine by itself. Only when humans come together and engage with the ugly, messy, violent world of politics can those things be changed. But art is extremely important to the human condition. It's maybe the most human thing that we can do, that we can partake in. It's something that does not discriminate necessarily across ability, because anybody can create some type of art and anybody can be moved by a piece of art. And when a person is moved by a piece of art, it's because that art reminds them of who they are. It reminds them of what came before them. It gives them a vision for what can come after them. It reminds us that we are humans, we are living beings, and thus our core essence is love, it's coexistence, it's life. It keeps us alive, frankly. There's no way that we're going to be able to wake up in the morning, let alone continue to fend for ourselves, continue to meet up and collectivize and organize and boycott and do direct action and mutual aid. None of that shit is going to happen without art, because nobody's going to have the hope. Nobody's going to have the energy. It is through music, it is through film, it is through paintings, it is through photography, it's through poetry, it's through literature that humans continuously remember what they are fighting for. And yet also, art is increasingly enhanced in terms of how much capacity it has for transforming people and their connection to their humanity when it connects with what's going on. This is something that I talked about in my video about, this new renaissance, I like to call it, where people are increasingly tuning out of art that does not connect to their lived reality. What do I mean by that? People do not want to hear rich people talk about how rich they are. People do not want to hear men talk about hot girls. They do not want to hear, they don't want to hear people talk about how much they fuck. They don't want to hear people talk about how cool they are. They don't want to hear these detached, generic exertions from rich people in between sponsorships of different companies. They want art. They want art that talks about what's going on in some way or another, that talks about the struggle to pay the bills, that talks about queerness, that talks about racism. They need art that shows humanities of different people existing rather than only exalt the types of people that are at the top of the class pyramid, exalts the types of ideas, the types of energies that we have been told are what make us worthy of living. We are worthy of life regardless of how much money we have. We are worthy of life regardless of whether or not we are white, regardless of whether or not we are able-bodied in the conventional way, whether or not we are neurotypical, whether or not we are fitting the conventional beauty standard. We are worthy of life. And not only that, we are worthy of dignity. We are worthy of respect. We are worthy of a loving, dignified life. And that is what art can tell us right now. And so what Bad Bunny does is, in this performance, is not something radical, okay? I have critiques of Bad Bunny, right? I'm not somebody who just stands Bad Bunny abjectly. And I don't think that this Super Bowl halftime show was something that I could call perfect, or I could call exactly what everybody needed at the time. I could nitpick, I could make critiques, but to sit and not acknowledge the work put into it, the symbolism and the storytelling put into it, and how important those symbols are in terms of igniting that feeling in people, igniting that remembering in people, igniting that vision in people, I would just not be able to be honest with you, okay? I would just be kind of letting people down. Okay. And that's not to say that it had to be for you. If you personally didn't care about it, or if you feel like you just didn't want to engage with it, you didn't want to deal with the spectacle, you wanted to turn away from the spectacle, I respect that too. But I think a lot of people, and we'll talk about this, were brought to not just tears, but to confrontation and reflection and inspiration, were energized by seeing these symbols, these messages. And some of those symbols and messages I thought were beyond what I expected. They were more antagonistic towards oppression than I expected. Not that it was radical, but he went a little farther than I thought he would. So I'll just go over this Instagram post from Impact, which goes slide by slide, breaking down different aspects of the storytelling, of the symbolism, which begins with the sugarcane fields. And this is going to come up later in terms of some things that Latinos, and I told you I have critiques, I have thoughts. This is not just going to be a Bad Bunny kiss fest. I have thoughts, but it starts with the sugarcane fields. And frankly, I feel as though, you know what, let's put that on pause for a second. There was also him climbing onto the electric poles. This was especially during the song El Apagón, meaning the power outage, the blackout. And that song is a very kind of pro-Puerto Rican sentiment that speaks pretty directly to the ways in which the U.S. has destroyed Puerto Rico's power structure, the negligence in terms of Puerto Rican power, in terms of, the negligence in terms of Puerto Rico's power grid, its energy grid, and the ways in which Puerto Ricans have found ways to survive and to empower themselves despite that. I don't know if I'm going to get got just for showing those little glimpses. There's a lot of images from different parts of Puerto Rican culture. There was a real wedding that took place in the show. No. Okay, so let's go back to the sugarcane fields. Y'all not going to get me today. Actually, you know what? This is how I'll do it. So first, I also want to talk about this analysis by a leftist writer named Eric J. Ramos, who is, I believe, connected with PSL. I'm not affiliated with PSL. I just thought that this thread was really good, really well written, really smart. So he says, in many ways, Bad Bunny's performance at the Super Bowl is one of the biggest bundles of contradictions one could imagine, which makes it fun to tease out, so I'm going to pull a few things. As a historical materialist, you understand the need to move people through the alphabet. You want to get them to Z, but they may be starting from A or D or H, and you can't move them along just by shouting Z at them. I think this point is really important, right? Especially when we talk about the idea of contradictions. I'm not going to get all academic language on you, but there is something very key to Marxist thought and to leftist thought that we call dialectics, which is essentially the understanding of how contradicting forces, usually two contradicting forces, create something. It says, instead of trying to understand something by seeing it as one thing, we can understand something by seeing it as these two things in conflict with each other, right? And it kind of disturbs me to see how many people like to go online and say that they're pro-revolution, pro-resistance, but they don't think dialectically. And I don't mean that to sound like pretentious, but I mean that to say that the idea that everybody's got to be at the same place, and if not, we simply can't think or work with them, and they simply must be ops of one degree or another, it has never been conducive to building anything, right? Moreover, the fact that the contradictions exist should be the place where you find your interest. It should be the thing that makes you intrigued in doing dialectical analysis. So the fact that there's contradiction in Bad Bunny making this statement about Puerto Rico, using independence imagery with the old school Puerto Rican flag, talking about labor in Puerto Rico, talking about uplifting Puerto Rican peoples, talking about also love being bigger than hate, and all the American flags of all the different countries of the Americas. The fact that he could do that, and at the same time, it's part of the Super Bowl halftime show as this mass media commercialized event that is going to make a bunch of billionaires, especially white billionaires, a bunch of money, and that is also fundamentally connected to some of the most virulent exploitation that we're supposed to be up against. You know, wearing a Zara outfit. Bad Bunny was wearing a custom tailored Zara outfit when Zara is this fast fashion outlet that has had a destructive impact on the environment and has destructive labor conditions. Those are contradictions, right? That cannot mean it's one thing or the other. That means those two contradictions created something that is worthy of analysis. And to be so incurious about it, I think just like makes things a lot worse. Does that make sense? I don't know if I was talking too, I loved Revolutionary Thoughts video about dialectics. I don't know if I'm talking too over the head, too like jargony. It just feels like we're not in an era anymore where we have to keep falling for the binary, okay? Whether we're talking about on a gender level, a sexuality level, whether we're talking about good or bad, we need to be talking about things beyond binaries. And that doesn't mean that we simply view the oppressor as yet another member of the oppressed, that we simply avoid conflict. It's quite the opposite. We can only be enriched in our ability to do conflict if we understand the complications, right? So yeah, I really like this analysis. You know, he goes on to say that Benito is someone who has played a role, that's Bad Bunny's name, Benito, who has played a role in moving many people along in that alphabet from wherever they are as he moves along it himself. So I'm working on a video essay about Bad Bunny, where he started his career. He was talking about politics pretty early on. He was talking about Hurricane Maria and the U.S.'s impact on it pretty early on. He helped, bolster a social movement that ousted the governor of Puerto Rico in 2018. Que quizás tenían el miedo, pero ese miedo se acabó. Puerto Rico no se va a dejar. Bienvenido a la generación del yo no me dejo, los quiero Puerto Rico. But at the same time, he has learned a lot about misogyny. He's learned about race. He's learned about what kind of messages to put out in his music and what kind of figure he can be. He has clearly started to shift a bit and becoming, if not more woke or whatever, just becoming more mindful, more thoughtful, more caring about his depictions of not only Puerto Rican people, but people of different genders, people of different races, and bringing together different generations. And just because that message was for one of love, which is the same message that gets bastardized all the time to keep us docile, does not mean that him saying that is necessarily making us more docile. It could be actually empowering us a lot more, because it can be moving us from A to B or from D to E. It could be moving us more to see like, okay, yeah, it is true, right? I can stand against injustice, and that doesn't mean that I'm operating from a place of hate. And if I see what the people who are doing this oppression, if I see them as committing hate, as being, in line with hate, that can tell me that I can be on the side of love when I fight against it. I don't know. There's a lot there, right? Ramos notes that, watching our island be gentrified and taken over, in reference to PR, Benito slowly began to realize himself as a more explicit political actor. He supported the pro-independence candidate heavily, buying billboards across the island that read, "To vote for PNP is to vote for corruption. Who votes for PNP doesn't love Puerto Rico, and voting for PNP is voting for Luma." Okay? So where you have in the United States a celebrity like Taylor Swift that won't even say anything when Donald Trump uses her song, but will say something if Olivia Rodrigo makes a song that's a little bit sounding like her. Where you have celebrities in the United States that are like, oh, I don't know, like, I'm on the side of like peace. Bad Bunny in Puerto Rico is actively buying out billboards that says, vote for this center, like, if you vote for the center-right party, you're voting for oppression. If you vote for this, you're voting for the same problems over and over again. We need to vote them out. We need to vote in this pro-independence social democrat coalition candidate, okay? That's what Bad Bunny's been doing politically, okay? So he's not just somebody who will only talk about love and peace, but won't talk about fighting a fight, but won't talk about politics, okay? And you can still criticize those politics. Is it enough? Is it far enough? Is he really understanding what's at stake in certain cases? That's a discussion to be had, but it's certainly not the same cloth that other people are cut from, right? And it had a huge impact. As Ramos notes, thousands of traditionally apathetic youth registered to vote and began their journey to realize themselves as political actors. You have to understand, in Puerto Rico, it was a two-party system, right? Very similar to what happens in the US. Two-party system. One party is centrist, maybe center-left. Another party is right-wing. And those two parties have dominated electoral politics since Puerto Rico has been a territory of the US. Those have been the dominant forces. And this past election, the right-wing governor candidate won, but in second place was a third party. It was a third party that was the farthest left, that was newly built from a coalition of different leftist organizations, that was pro-independence, that was investing into social safety nets. That candidate had a real shot of becoming the governor. That would be like if in the United States you had a celebrity like a Taylor Swift that mobilized super hard for a third party, and that third party came in all the way to overturn the Democrats and come in second place to the Republicans in an election. Just as a crude kind of analysis, right? That was partially also because there was a recognition that, in this case, the Democrats of Puerto Rico, the centrist party of Puerto Rico, is really a center-right party that doesn't do any better than the right wing. In fact, they collaborate on the same goals, just more weakly and docilely. Very similar to what's happening in the US with the Democrat Party. Very similar to what people are realizing about Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris and all the rest, right? That is what Bad Bunny's impact did. He mobilized thousands and thousands of young people in Puerto Rico to vote, and they ended up making a third party extremely relevant, but they lost. And yet there was still a feeling of like, okay, this is an immense heartbreak, but it's also kind of a hopeful point because shit is changing. And that was Bad Bunny's message. We've been here before, we're going to do it again. We keep fighting. So that was how he ended 2024. Then he goes into 2025 and puts out Debí Tirar Más Fotos, an album which is about all these themes about Puerto Rico, some themes about independence, right? There was a song on the album called Lo que le pasó a Hawaii. I've talked about it here before. And this song is essentially, it's called What Happened to Hawaii. And it's comparing the process of Hawaii becoming a part of the U.S. and becoming a state of the U.S. and how the natives have been extracted from it, exploited, kicked out, race mixed, so to speak. And how Hawaii has turned into this tourism spot for well-to-do white people and other well-to-do people to make use of the land, while the natives remain this underclass. And what used to be an island that had this predominant sort of either indigenous or mixed indigenous population, has become this place where it's a lot of just white people who have no connection to the land, making use of it, exploiting it, enjoying it. One of the things that really surprised me about Bad Bunny's Super Bowl performance is that he had Ricky Martin, a queer man, if you might know, a gay man, come on and sing Lo que le pasó a Hawaii, which is a political song, right? With a political message. It's literally a song saying, I don't want them to do to you what they did to Hawaii. And you're singing it in the US's biggest event, right? And who's the they? The US, right? That's not nothing to me. Is it revolutionary? Is it gonna make everybody on Twitter happy? No. But that's not nothing. That's kind of a big deal. You don't see artists make statements like that very often. Sometimes you'll see Black American artists make statements along those lines, or like kind of talk about those revolutionary aesthetics a little bit. That's the only thing I can think of that would compare it. And I frankly was scared that Bad Bunny was going to come on and just bring on Drake and J Balvin and do a bunch of songs that, you know, a bunch of gringos know and try to sing in English a bunch. I was not sure what he was going to do. Everything was on the table. And yet what he chose to do was speak to the exact journey and the exact vision that has been at the forefront of his work this past 2 years. Instead of compromising his vision, and instead of, you know, dialing back his rhetoric to such a degree that it was assimilationist, he instead dialed back his rhetoric just a little bit to be still encompassing some of those themes, right? Critiquing US empire, thinking about an independent Puerto Rico, and empowering people of Latin America in some way to at least feel seen. Some of the stuff that was shown, like people were talking about, oh, like they had the kids sleeping on the chair. Like that's so Latino, which is kind of funny because, you know, if you talk to people of other ethnic backgrounds, that happens in everybody's party, right? Like you talk to Africans and they say that happens at African parties too. So it's not necessarily just like, oh, only Latinos do this, but it is such an iconic part of the Latin American experience. And importantly, it's quite different from the image of Latin Americans that Latin Americans have been essentially pushed to put out. Instead of it being an image of, look at how beautiful we are, look at how hot we are, look at our empanadas, right? Instead of that, or instead of putting out a very commercialized image, something that you can sell, he put out images that were like relatable things for members of the working class. And that distinguishes mass art from being bread and circuses. It still will always have a bread and circus component because of the political economy behind it. Because at the end of the day, who's making the money? At the end of the day, who's benefiting? But to make art that specifically reminds people of who they are, what they're actually living in, and telling them like, that's actually beautiful. Who you are is actually beautiful and you deserve more. That's not the same thing as just distracting people. And I hate when people use this language of distraction. 9 out of 10 times when people say something like, this thing is just a distraction, this thing is just distracting people from focusing on the real issues, which is XYZ. What that tells me is you lack the ability to think about two things at once. You lack the ability to see how things are interconnected, okay? What Bad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime show was not just a distraction. Maybe there are elements of it you can critique for being more distracting or not radical enough or not challenging enough. The fact that he did it in the first place, you can critique. But you can't say it's just a run-of-the-mill Super Bowl halftime show like Lady Gaga just did it by herself. Even if Lady Gaga did it, maybe she would have done something interesting about queerness. I don't know. But like just some regular celebrity shit. Oh, let's dance. Let's have fun. Let's just perform the hits. It wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. And it went beyond just, oh, I see things that remind me of me. I see faces that look like my face, right? Representation. It wasn't just basic representation stuff. It was literally messages about anti-US statehood politics. There was also a shout out for DR right at the start. Walter points out in the chat. Shouting out DR at the start is important because a lot of Bad Bunny's music is heavily Dominican. Okay? The song Titi Me Preguntó starts the show off. It's one of his biggest hits and it's a Dominican dembow record. Oh, Denai's here. Hi, Denai. You're right, Denai. It is directing people to learn more. As a child, I was so overstimulated at those parties. That's exactly what the experience is, right? Like, I've talked to like people who, you know, are from African backgrounds, who are like, yeah, it's the same thing. You know, it's just these loud ass family parties that go on for like 5 hours. And like, as a child, you're like forced to be there and you're sitting on this chair, just kind of fucking nodding off. Listen, I'm pro naps at parties in general. I do that shit at my big age of 29. But yes, Bad Bunny, as Julian points out, got a lot of his swag from DR. Not all of it. A lot of the stuff that he was doing, you know, plena, bomba, like this is Puerto Rican stuff too, okay? But a lot of it is Dominican stuff. And so starting it off with the reference to Anthony Santos, Hoy se bebe, with a Dominican artist who says it. That's like a kind of peace offering. And it's beyond just, oh, well, these people look Latino, so I feel represented. It's, Well, let's talk about the little cultural distinctions, right? Hours and hours and hours and hours. Exactly, Rolando, exactly. So Bad Bunny is a political actor as a celebrity, and you might not think his politics are perfect. Of course they're not. But they're still way ahead of the zeitgeist in terms of what other people do, especially in the music industry. Way ahead. You know, I'll continue with Ramos's essay. He dropped his latest album and kicked 100 doors open. There was a reason it was immediately gripped by the most revolutionary sections of Puerto Rican independistas and socialists. The sheer amount of use value, it's a Marxist term, and someone with that kind of platform putting out songs that talked about gentrification, settler colonialism, and more, it gave us incredible amounts of space to talk to people about independence, about the nature of the U.S. relationship with Puerto Rico, which continues to be one of its biggest embarrassments, about our African roots, music that tells us the story of how we all got here and what is happening to us today. Okay, his decision to include bomba and plena music throughout, genres born from Puerto Rican slave communities, which have seen a revival recently in resistance movements, adds immense depth to this message. You got people questioning the colonial status of Puerto Rico, questioning the colonial roots of the U.S. itself, questioning U.S. hegemony and its claim to what it means to be American. Why is English even the dominant language here? Why are Puerto Rican citizens? When did that happen? You got white people questioning whiteness and if there's really any benefit to this white supremacy bullshit. He also makes this point that we shouldn't understand co-optation by the capitalist music industry as complete negation. I see people make this mistake all the time, okay? There's a way that y'all will quote the same video game. Y'all know the one video game, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, where the one character says, you know, capital will subsume any critiques of it. And people will quote that over and over to essentially tell you that anytime that you do anything that is critiquing the system, what you're actually doing is just giving capital another way to subsume you. And that's not quite what's happening, right? That's not quite what subsumption is either, okay? If you think about it, subsumption and consumption is not just a one-way street. It's not just you are consumed, you disappear. When you are consumed by something, when you're subsumed by something, the thing that subsumes you takes on a lot of your properties. It gets shaped by you. Yeah, Disco Elysium. For instance, if you consume something, food as a human being, the food doesn't disappear because it's in your body now. Because it's in your body, it affects your body, okay? So if you consume 50 ice cream scoops, it will have negative effects on your blood sugar, on your health in various ways. Ramos says, it must be said that yes, with his global popularity, there was no clearer, more profitable choice. However, it has always been at the same time a constant concession to oppressed peoples. Every popular form of music across the Americas was born in the shadows of oppression, created by the enslaved, campesinos, sharecroppers, and workers in palenques, ghettos, favelas, and barrios, proving our class has actually never had any issues with celebrating and mixing our cultures and the beauty that comes from it. Folk, jazz, cumbia, salsa, rock, and more. These are working class creations that initially faced resistance from the ruling class. Okay, so this is just how art works. And the alternative that a lot of people propose on the internet when they make these blanket like dismissals of like art and media as forms of resistance or as anything that could be, you know, politically critical or interesting, as distractions. The suggestion is essentially the working class should not express itself. Oppressed people should not express themselves through art. I cannot think of anything more dehumanizing, okay? But this is what hopelessness does to you. This is what happens when you choose to be hopeless instead of hopeful. What happens is that you then propose the very things that mean dehumanizing yourself and destroying yourself. Is Hawaii really that bad of a circumstance, asks Eric. So I'm glad you asked. If you are a native Hawaiian, yes. If you are an indigenous Hawaiian or a Polynesian person who lived in Hawaii or a working class person in Hawaii, yes, the circumstance is very bad. It's certainly not better than an independent Hawaii that is able to have sovereignty over its economy. Obviously, nothing happens in a bubble, but the statehood of Hawaii was an oppressive movement. It was an oppressive thing. So what that is I hate the rabble. I hate what working class and poor people do. I hate how oppressed people express themselves. I hate how they express their humanity. They should do this thing I tell them to do instead. Anyway, that's my rant on that. I don't want to get too descriptive of that. I don't want to get too bogged down. Let's conclude some points with Ramos's article, and then I'm going to move on. As revolutionaries who may be at X, Y, or Z and who understand the historical necessity of people moving letter by letter, you just have to appreciate someone who is at this conjunction and who is not at Z themselves, has the ability to move so many people along at so many points of entry and departure. And we have a duty to take back our revolutionary culture and be more welcoming to our people on this path than the capitalists. If the capitalists say, come as you are, we really can't afford to say, sorry, but you don't check all the boxes. That's a really good line, okay? And that kind of handles that critique that I have. And I don't want to get too bogged out on it anymore. The point is, in a period of time where tragedy is the narrative surrounding so much of Latin America, right? Tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. Every day we have to face everything from ICE to different forms of systemic racism to colonization and its new forms, right? Neocolonialism, imperialism, neoliberal imperialism, right? But if we're going to act like there's a world that exists in which the contradictions can just go away, and like we can just operate without any of the contradictions right now, but we just choose to not do that out of ignorance and out of our own backwardsness, then that's self-hate. That's the kind of oppressive thought process that keeps us exactly where we are, right? Which is not to say that those critiques are not worth making. It's to say that you gotta humanize people. At the very least, if you're going to have critical conversations, right? But more importantly, yeah, as Latin America is draped in tragedy, as the ugly head of colonialism and imperialism rears over and over again, we're being given art by a person from a colony who was a grocery bagger, right? That helps to pave the way for us to make a vision of our future, a vision of us more united, a vision of us celebrating our working class culture, a vision of us choosing to fight against hate. And I think that that's really important to say also because on the flip side, if Latin America is going to escape its cycles of destruction and tragedy, Latin Americans have to take accountability. And this is the other part of the conversation. So let's talk about it. Latinos do this thing where whenever we get the chance to celebrate ourselves, whenever we get the chance to talk about our pain and our victimization, we almost immediately try to make it reactionary because we try to abdicate our own responsibility for perpetuating that oppression, okay? Let's get into that juicy critical discourse you want to talk, like people want to have, right? If Latin America does not get over its antiquated, Eurocentric, white supremacist, patriarchal bullshit, if Latinos don't learn how to look past that type of shit and work in solidarity with people, this shit is just going to get worse and worse. If you want the oppressor to leave you alone, you have to stop allowing him to be in your head. You have to stop letting him take up so much damn space in your mind. And you have to stop looking for his comfort. And the reason that I say this goes back to some of the symbolism we were talking about. So let's finally return to the sugarcane fields, right? I like that this is being pointed out. I like Impact's write-up of this. But it's notable that this is described as, and this is not me getting at anybody, it's notable that this is described as revealing hardworking field workers nodding to the historic sugar and fruit farms in Puerto Rico and the legacy of agricultural workers. Because if you know the history of Puerto Rico and the history of Latin America more largely, in a lot of cases, then you know that those agricultural workers were African slaves at the beginning. Of course, that changed over time. Of course, the capitalist formations that came in with the U.S. created a whole new realm for the sugarcane industry, whatever. But you know how people say, like, the United States is built off of African slave labor. The United States is built off of African slave labor. You know what's built off of African slave labor? Latin America. If we're going to be all Americans, yeah, then we're all going to have to take accountability for what America is. Because it wasn't called Americans and it wasn't called America before Europeans got here, before Amerigo Vespucci got here. And the processes by which it turned into America were processes of what? Of white supremacy, of brutal colonialism, of the transatlantic slave trade. And like a lot of the facts of what the United States is that people are coming to grips with now under Trump, they apply to Latin America. It's just that Latin American countries are poorer and Latin American countries have been rendered violently subservient to the US as the leader of the imperial project. But that same imperial project has made a lot of people in Latin America rich, a lot of usually white people. And I've talked about this before, and sometimes people get mad. Oh, no, I'm Latino. Oh, we're all the same. Oh, we're all Colombian, white, black. It doesn't matter. It does. It has always mattered. And if it didn't matter, then it wouldn't be such virulent racism going on in your country. And if you don't want to acknowledge it, then you're not ready to be liberated from the United States. You're not ready to be liberated from the You're not ready to be liberated from the United States. You're not ready to be liberated from imperialism. If you want to just keep appropriating the same ideology of imperialism, you're not ready to be liberated from U.S. imperialism. If every time you want to talk about U.S. imperialism, you want to group in all Black Americans as if they are a part of U.S. imperialism. And you don't want to take the time to make the distinction between reactionary, bourgeois, comprador Black people, between Black people who sell their own people out versus Black people as a whole. As long as every single time we have this conversation, and then it's non-Black people from imperialized countries online that want to write articles, and this is why Black Americans are imperialists, y'all are not going to wake up from imperialism. And it's actually tragic, okay? Just to give you a sense of what it was. I'm working on this Bad Bunny video right now. Part of it is talking about the history of Puerto Rico, okay? This is the number of Black slaves in Puerto Rico and the percentage of the total population that they were. You'll note that this percentage was a lot smaller than the percentage in, let's say, Cuba. Cuba was like almost half of the population was Black slaves. But you'll see that there are these tens of thousands of Black slaves in Puerto Rico. You'll notice that its mid-19th century was still filled with Black slave labor. At a time when the abolition of slavery and the transition out of the transatlantic slave trade was becoming more popular around the world. And that's because Puerto Rico was led by and shaped by white Spaniards, white Europeans, and white criollos, which means, you know, basically people of Spanish and a little bit of mixed ancestry. And the criollos were the ones who, by and large, shaped the Puerto Rican identity, because, you know, they for them it was a resistance movement, it was an independence movement away from the Europeans who always discriminated against the criollos. They always said the criollos were Black, they were brown, they were less civilized, they were not truly dignified peoples. And so Puerto Rico becomes this criollo project, okay? Those criollos owned plantations with Black slaves on them. Those criollos discriminated against, committed acts of violence against, displaced indigenous peoples. Black peoples, right? That's what the criollos were doing, right? It's a whole conversation. But the last thing I'll say about this before I move on into, you know, really getting deep into this conversation is all of this slave population, even though it wasn't, you know, half of the population of Puerto Rico, almost all of these slaves were doing what? They were on the sugarcane plantations. The sugarcane plantations were primarily African slave labor, okay? So when Bad Bunny is doing the Super Bowl performance and it starts off in the sugarcane fields, a criticism that I could make, but I won't because it's actually kind of complicated and it's a difficult conversation to have, is that it's portrayed solely as the Puerto Ricans, the mixed ancestry Puerto Ricans that later on became the agricultural workers on the sugarcane fields, who were oppressed workers, right? And it's great to highlight them. And it also probably wouldn't look great if Bad Bunny started off his Super Bowl set as this, you know, light-skinned, mixed white Puerto Rican walking through the sugarcane fields with a bunch of Black people picking sugar out of the sugarcane. Like, that probably wouldn't have looked great. But again, what happens is that we have this lack of memory. We have this amnesia of the fact that Latin America has been this racist project for a long time. And that is because of imperialism. That is because of colonialism. That is not something separate that we should claim as the good version of the racism versus the United States' bad version of the racism. Yeah, sorry who says it. It would have been offensive to only show Black people in the field. But, you know, it's not a criticism necessarily, but a lot of people who will analyze that will not know that it was Black slave labor that built Puerto Rico in a lot of ways, as well as many other parts of Latin America, okay? So, this is a conversation that is about race. And the racial conversation is always one that Latinos don't want to have, which sounds familiar, right? Because the racial conversation prior to, let's say, 2015, 2016 was something that white Americans didn't want to have. And then Trump got elected for the first time and it was like, what? This is not who we are. And then Black Lives Matter happened the first time and it was, we have to stop this. I can't believe that America is still like this. I can't believe the US is still like this. And then Black Lives Matter happened the second time and people rioted in the streets. Oh my gosh, this is who we are. It is an indelible part of the American project that black American slave labor built this project, and black Americans continue to be an underclass in the United States, and we got to stand up for black people, man. And then they forgot, and then Trump got elected again. And then it's, oh my God, look at this racism. For Latin America, a lot of y'all don't even seem to have had your Trump moment yet. Okay, a lot of us have not had our Trump moment yet. We've had our pickings as far as particular leaders that could represent that. But maybe it's going to take, unfortunately, tragically, a lot more black people suffering and dying for Latinos to wake up and say, "Oh shit, we're just like the gringos. We're bad. Our countries and our identities have been built on this racism and this exploitation. Oh no." But it goes deeper than that. Because as a lot of Latin Americans will point out too, it's not about race, man. It's not about race. It's about class. It's about where you're from. You know, it's different people. Vamos a ver. One of the parts of the Super Bowl performance that I also saw highlighted quite a bit on social media that I found to be, you know, one of the cool parts as well was the flag part at the end. And not just the fact that all of those flags and countries were named. You know, it was an emotional thing that he did, you know, naming all of those. But that's like, again, nothing too crazy, nothing too radical. But within that, I was very glad to see people pointing out Haiti as part of that, okay? You know, the Haitian flag was uplifted. He shouts out Haiti, right? Is this something that is the same kind of thing as like liberation for Haitians? No, right? But a lot of Latinos don't even want to acknowledge that Haiti is there, let alone that Haitians are Latinos. And not only are Haitians Latino, right? And not only are they very much there would not be a Latin America. There would not be Latin American countries. There would not be Latin American independence without Haiti, without Haiti. Simply put, end of discussion. Without the Haitian Revolution, there is no spark igniting the, you know, downtrodden Spanish colonies to be like, you know what, we can do independence too. If the African slaves on Hispaniola can get together and rise up against Spain and France, particularly France in the Haitian Revolution, we can do that to Spain. Spain's weaker than France. And we're not black. We're not even slaves. We're criollos. We have education. We speak Spanish fluently. We could do that. That spark is very much part of the canon. It is very much recorded history. That Simón Bolívar, the Bolivarian revolutions, and the various Latin American, Spanish American wars of independence were inspired by Haiti. Just look at the timeline. Late 1700s, early 1800s, Haitian Revolution. Right afterwards, Spanish American Wars of Independence. But it's not even that, though. It's even deeper than that. Because when the Spanish American Wars of Independence were fought, they were not always successes at first. Simón Bolívar was not just kicking ass and taking names from the beginning. And when Simón Bolívar was beat in Venezuela in 1815, where did he go? He went to Haiti. He sought political asylum in the only free republic in Latin America, Haiti. This is from IBW21.org, when a defeated Bolívar landed in Port-au-Prince, President Alexandre Pétion understood the significance of the man who led the liberation movement. Pétion offered Bolívar 1,000 rifles, ammunition, and other supplies. He also provided hundreds of Haitian sailors and soldiers who had fought in the Haitian Revolutionary War. The offering came with one condition, okay? Bolívar had to abolish slavery in South America. When he found a new republic, Bolívar agreed. He and his army once again took on Spain, returning to Haiti a second time for assistance, and triumphantly declared Venezuela an independent country in 1821. After later defeating Spain across South America, Bolívar declared himself president of Gran Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. There is no Latin American independence without the Haitian Revolution. There was no Latinidad succeeding and beating the Spanish colonial project without Haitians. Without Haitians who delivered key supplies and key reinforcements based off of one promise: free the slaves. And what did Simón Bolívar do? What did Simón Bolívar do? He didn't abolish slavery. He sought to maintain Latin America's racial and class hierarchy so that white elites like himself would not fall to a partidocracia, a so-called mulatto takeover. You know, Bolívar did free many slaves, but he did not abolish slavery. Having seen what it meant for black people to be truly free in Haiti, when his own black and indigenous generals launched a coup against his growing authoritarianism in 1828, Bolívar complained bitterly that they had the audacity to want absolute equality. As a warning to South America's black and brown population, he had the mixed race leader of the coup, Jose Padilla, executed. But you don't get stories about that on Netflix, do you? You go to Latin American Netflix and it's Bolivar, the story of Bolivar, the great hero of Latin America, the great liberator, this slightly tan man who is handsome and so woke. He is our hero. But you don't hear about the fact that he relied on black people. He relied on Haitians to do all this work. And then when it was his time to pay back those black people, he quit halfway through and then started lashing out at them. Because that's what Latinos do. That's what white people do. And a lot of Latinos have not let go of whiteness. They have not. That's the thing that they don't tell you about. And what happens today? Haiti is one of the most discriminated against countries in the world. Haitians are one of the most discriminated against people in the world. By who? Primarily by Latin Americans. There's a massive amount of Haitian migration to Mexico and the United States who had to leave Chile because they were not able to find employment and because they were facing virulent racism in Latin America and Chile, right? Then they recently lost temporary protection in the United States. 300,000 Haitian immigrants who lived and worked in the U.S. legally, sometimes for decades, were set to lose their immigration protections. A federal court order kept the program in place that kept these people's protected status. In the Dominican Republic, where my family's from, 4 decapitated women found near border with Haiti. Okay, this is grisly. This is a very disturbing story, okay? There are 4 Haitian women found along the southern part of the border. And according to a Puerto Rican newspaper called El Nuevo Dia, and many other people's theories, the 4 Haitian women found dead had been deported from Puerto Rico several months earlier. So somebody asked in the chat, how did you get so knowledgeable? And where should Latinos and Latin Americans start? So part of it is that it's my job, right? It is my job to be as knowledgeable as possible so that I can relay these stories to people and help educate them. And because of that, I'm very privileged in that regard, and I'm very able to focus on that in ways that a lot of people aren't. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. Another thing is, if you want to educate yourself more, and this is the big thing that I have to tell Latinos, right? You have to study, and you have to do more than just study by reading books. Studying by reading books is definitely a huge part of it. Yeah, the stream of Foreign Fridays is still down. Studying and reading books is a huge part of it, okay? For instance, a lot of Latinos, like even this author himself, Edward Paulino, who grew up in New York City as a child of Dominican immigrants, never learned about the Perejil massacre, the 1937 massacre of Haitians by the Dominican Republic, and particularly Rafael Trujillo, the dictator of the country, okay? Excuse me. So this is Rafael Trujillo in 1937, in a period of time in which he was, negotiating, let's say, and conflicting with Haiti over land and over the regaining of certain land for the Dominican Republic. I have seen, investigated, and inquired about the needs of the population of the Dominicans who were complaining of the depredations by Haitians living among them, thefts of cattle, provisions, faith, etc., and were thus prevented from enjoying in peace the products of their labor. I have responded, I will fix this. And we have already begun to remedy the situation. 300 Haitians are now dead in Banica. This remedy will continue. I will have to, on another day, give you guys a talk about the Dominican Republic and why the Dominican Republic is the Israel of Latin America, okay? I might actually do a video essay about that next. But a lot of this does come from, starting with a book like Las Venas Abiertas en Latinoamérica, like that Ray pointed out. Another book that I've been reading for my project is called, I forgot what it's called. It's by Walter Mignolo, and it's called The Myth of Latino America. I think that's what it's called. Just start by looking at the scholarship from that start level, and then looking into the resources, and then looking into those resources. But another thing is, this shit has to stop, right? There has to at least be a concerted energy and effort. You're not going to get everything right at first. And there's going to be times where you're going to be criticized even though you try to do your best. But a lot of Latinos do not want to cross over and just take on the challenge of destroying anti-blackness in their societies, of ridding their societies from anti-blackness, of ridding their societies of anti-Haitianness, especially in the Dominican Republic. But this is a theme everywhere. There's not a concerted effort to talk about, hey, we got to stop being racist against black people. Our countries were built by black people. Through our exploitation, our violent destruction of their societies, our ancestors, for better or for worse, our ancestors, for worse really, took on all this slave labor, enslaved and impoverished black Americans. And to this very day, we continue to take on their ideology, the ideologies of our forefathers. Not somebody who's in Spain right now, in Castilla, not somebody in fucking Portugal, in France, or in the United States. Our ancestors, the people who came from there and came here and had babies with other Europeans and blacks and indigenous people. Those people are who make up our society. We are living in their vision of the world, and it is a terrible vision for the world. It is one in which our countries are filled with inequality. Our countries cannot access the resources that they need for the people that actually need them. Our countries are heavily biased towards the rich. Our countries are heavily violent against people of color. Our countries are filled with problems, infrastructural problems. We got buildings falling apart, okay? People go to fucking listen to merengue music and bachata music in an upper middle class, place where celebrities perform in Santo Domingo, and the fucking building caves in on them. And you're worried about some fucking Haitians. Well, if Haiti wants help, they need to fix their own problems. You won't fix your own problems. The only reason that you won't even see yourself that way is because you could look across the border and see Haiti and continue to believe this myth like they have nothing to do with you, like they're not human beings, and like all of their problems are their fault. And as long as you're doing better than a fucking Haitian, and as long as you're a little bit lighter and speak Spanish and listen to and go to church, Christian church, well, you don't have anything to worry about. As buildings literally cave in on you, as your government continues to steal money from you, corrupt politicians continue to steal money from you, as crime continues to flow throughout the streets because people are poor and trying to figure shit out, and they're now at the point where they're going to commit violence and do whatever they have to do. As people are kidnapped, the Dominican Republic is one of the most visited places, let's say, for kidnappings of young women for sex trafficking. The Dominican Republic is a hub for sex trafficking of children. The shit that they talk about in the Epstein files, that's not gringo shit. That's shit that your people are doing to your own people. And you want to talk about some black people? You want to talk about, at least I'm not fucking black? Are you out of your mind? I don't want to hear anything. After all this stuff that I've said about Bad Bunny and all the credit that I want to give him, I don't want to hear anything from anybody celebrating Latinidad if they're not going to take that and turn that into actual equality for everybody in Latin America. I don't want to hear it. These people fucking fought for us. These people are the migrant workers that you pay $2 an hour or less to make your businesses run. These are the people that fucking clean up your Airbnbs. These are the people that work in your restaurants, and at a drop of a dime, if you have a problem and you don't want to acknowledge it, you blame them. You know why? Because you're no fucking better than a gringo. You're worse because you're a fucking person who wants to be a gringo. The only person that is fucking worse than the devil is a person who wishes that they could be just as bad as the devil and copies him step for step. That's what y'all are. That is what Latinidad is filled with. I don't want to hear anybody talk about Bad Bunny in Puerto Rico if they're going to go out and still ignore Afro-Latino artists and still ignore black people in fucking Latin America and still talk about racism doesn't exist here. If you want to do that, just throw the fucking shit out. Que se joden todo. That is the original Vende Patria, Hot Cheeros. The original Vende Patria is, I don't like black people. I don't want you to marry a black person. We have pure race. We have pure sangre. The original Vende Patria is blanqueamiento. The original Vende Patria is we are criollo. We are criollo. We're different. We're not Europeans. We're criollos. And we have close to European races, but with a little bit of spice in it. Meanwhile, what they speak in fucking Haiti? Creole. You got your whole shit from Haiti and you won't fucking help these people. Not only will you not help these people, you keep attacking them. At the very least, just leave them the fuck alone. Exactly, you can't make salsa merengue without African drums. You couldn't have built Puerto Rico without sugarcane plantations. And then you want to go back and, well, anybody is anybody. Stabby sorrows, all for Latino pride, then be offended when indigenous people want autonomy. Get out of here, bro. Like, if we really want this oppression to end, if we really hate poverty and hate the exploitation of our people, and hate corruption, like we say we do, we need to start with ourselves. And I don't mean that in like some pick yourself up by your bootstraps, start a company and make a bunch of money by exploiting other people. I mean, you need to go out there and start feeding people. If you mad that people don't have fucking houses, you need to fucking help them get houses. You need to advocate for better housing policies. You need to fight your own government. You need to grow some fucking guts and fight the actual people oppressing you. That is the tragedy of Latin America. That is the tragedy of Latinidad. That is the tragedy of Latinidad. People always talk about, oh, slavery was so many years ago. Why does it still matter? The Haitian Revolution was so many years ago. Oh, Operación Condor was so many years ago. Why does it matter? It still matters because you still believe in that shit. You still perpetuate those things. I had some stuff about, racial inequality in Latin America that I was going to put on screen. This is something we talked about in our White Latino video. Pigmentocracy. The fact that nobody wants to acknowledge it, but the people that have money in Latin America are by and large people who are lighter skinned. Unless, they are one of the people that potentially work in sports or work in music. God, I wonder what that sounds like. That most of the people in your country that have money are white or lighter skinned, and the only people that are black, and most of the people that are black or darker skinned that have money, it's because they play sports or they make music or media. Gee, I wonder what that sounds like. I wonder who that sounds like. I was going to talk about the fact that, as you probably know, the people who killed Alex Pretti, the 2 officers who shot Alex Pretti, what are their names? Jesus Ochoa, Raymundo Gutierrez. This is what they look like. As far as we understand, this is what they look like. If I covered this guy's name, you would think his name is Steve Rogers. It's time for Latinos to grow up in this way, bro. It's time to acknowledge how caste has shaped our societies. It's time to acknowledge how anti-immigration does not benefit our societies. It's time to acknowledge how the only thing that's going to help get us out of this hole and end these cycles of tragedy and destruction is if we become better people. Not richer people, not more powerful people, not more violent people, better people. Because guess what? History tells us something very clearly. If you need to get something done for your own independence, you're going to have to call black people. History has told us that loud and clear. You're going to have to call some Africans. So long as you guys want to still live in this world where, we want to have our own thing and we don't want to really talk about blackness and we don't really talk about African people, we don't relate to them, they're different, they're backwards, they're whatever. Okay, then stay where you're at. You don't want Haitian people's help. You don't want no concept that Haitian people might help you, right? No concept that Haitian people might help you. You only are always the one that's helping Haitian people. Meanwhile, you wouldn't have a fucking country without Haitian people. To bring it home, this Bad Bunny thing is a powerful thing. I think it does bring people closer to understanding this truth. I think it does bring people closer to actually confronting their lived reality, to actually caring about these things, and to actually understanding that it's not just about pretending to be a better person than somebody else, but it's about having the kind of solidarity that builds a better world. Because you're working together with people instead of working against people. But Latinidad, if you now want to accept this blessing, you have to grow up. This Bad Bunny halftime show, yeah, it can be a very empowering thing. But with great power comes great responsibility. That's the end of my stream.